to Thailand and a week of new memories.
So Mike White knew exactly what he was doing with this season of The White Lotus. He explored sex, spirituality, and religion in such a deep way that actually can be so interesting if you look at it from a different perspective. Now let's dive into the deeper and spiritual meaning behind this masterpiece of a season. So the last two seasons were all about colonialism, and the second one was all about sex and seduction, so to say. And now this season, I believe, focuses on an even more interesting topic when it comes to the aspect of human nature that it tries to, criticize but also glorify in a way. And that is spirituality. Nowadays, so many people are spiritually enlightened. They've had their awakening, me included. And there's just something so interesting in this show and in this season especially that Mike White tried to actually show the negative downsides that spirituality can have, and also just some of the regular things that might not even be connected to spirituality, but more to sex and toxic friendships and trauma and relationships. Now I'd say let's get right into it and start with the crazy friendship triangle that we're having this season. So we have the three friends, Kate, Lori, and Jacqueline. They used to be friends since they were in high school. They seem to not have seen each other for a long time, and they are in their 40s, and they try to act as if they are in their 20s. They're like, I'm not old yet, and all of that just showed how these women were basically very scared to get older. However, that is not what I would like to focus on right now, but I would like to focus on this toxic friendship dynamic that was there, especially in this trio. And we all know what happens when you're in a trio. So in the first episode, we see Kate and Jacqueline gossiping about Lori, and then she starts crying. She didn't even know that they were gossiping about her, but she just felt some kind of underlying energy there which made her cry, I guess. And also, she seems to be the only one having that corporate 9-to-5 life while they are very successful and actually living a more lovely life and a more classic one, so to say. And they all seem to slightly grow jealous of one another, and that was especially shown how they were backstabbing each other and gossiping about each other the entire time in the back. So then in the second episode, we saw two of the other people gossiping about her. So that was just very interesting to see, because you therefore see that who gossips to you gossips about you. And this is what I would like to focus on for a second. Can we actually appreciate this one quote that basically everyone knows about, but it's so important to just really look at it from a different perspective. The quote that who gossips to you gossips about you is so true. I've had many of those kind of friends, and whenever someone tries to gossip a lot about other people and you just get some kind of weird low vibrational vibe, so to say, you will sense at some point that they are not real, and they probably gossip about you the exact same way. So when I saw that those two people were gossiping about Lori, I knew exactly that at the end of the day, she is also going to be gossiping with them about her. So it's all just a toxic triangle and a circle of gossip that goes on and on. And the best thing you can do when you have friends who have such a negative energy and they just simply try to gossip the entire time and you get offended by that negative energy, you just simply need to cut them out of your life. Because I promise you, if they gossip to you in such a crazy way, they also gossip about you in an even more crazier way, and you'll feel very backstabbed and very bad if you get to find out what they say about you. So just leave those friends behind. And I'm not saying that it's weird to talk about other people. Everybody talks about other people sometimes when it is actually necessary, and you just talk about the things that have happened. But crazy gossip, as in like, have you seen her hair? She doesn't look good. Oh, that is so ugly. I think she's such a bitch. That is really toxic gossip, and that is something that you should definitely cut out of your life, because our subconscious minds actually, if we look at it at a spiritual level, they do not actually understand the difference between gossiping about someone else or talking about yourself. So if you gossip about someone else and you say, they're a bitch, they're such a cunt, I hate them, they're ugly, I hate them so much, what do you think your brain is going to think? It's going to think that you're talking about yourself. It doesn't quite know the difference there. And the funny part about that is that why do people even gossip at all? It's because they are insecure and they try to put other people down to feel better themselves. And this is something that Mike White is actually a genius at showing us. He shows that those people, they're just constantly trying to put each other down.
You're always fake, and you're vain and selfish.
Lori then tried to really actively put Jacqueline down for sleeping with that one man, when in fact it was pretty much the other way around. And then she slept with some of Alexei's friends as some form of revenge or whatever, but that didn't quite work, because that's so stupid. Why would you do anything about revenge? Now I will get back to revenge in just a couple of moments, but I think we can all agree for a second how toxic this whole friend group trio is, and how we should definitely look out for those kind of people in our lives. And before we move on to the Ratliff family, I would like to mention this one scene that I found to be very interesting among these three women. So they were all on a table and they were talking about politics somehow. And Kate was talking about how she was just at that one place and she always goes to church and she talks to pretty much conservative and classical traditional people. And then Jacqueline and Lori from their LA, New Yorkish bubble, they try to criticize her for that. And they're like, why do you not feel alienated? That is so weird. And especially as a woman, how can you talk to people who are Trump supporters and all that type of shit? And then Kate was like, no, I'm an independent. I'm not actually like that. And the funny thing about this scene is that it was making fun of liberals and leftists the same way that it was making fun of Trump supporters. And a lot of people I saw on TikTok were actually discussing whether it was making fun of Trump people or making fun of liberal people, but it was making fun of both the exact same way. It is not like Mike White chooses a side over there. It just shows how politics nowadays are really just dividing people, and they divide them into different groups that then hate each other. And this is why I am someone who doesn't care about politics. Like, a lot of people call me crazy for this, but I believe that all that stuff is manipulated anyway and just made to split people up. There's this one ancient concept of divide et impera. Make sure to look it up if it's interesting to you. That really just showcases how people get divided and that they hate each other, which is exactly what I just said. It basically showed how Trump supporters are sometimes not able to admit how they are actually Trump supporters because they seem to be embarrassed, and how people who are liberal and leftists, they are really scared to actually see some other opinion. They cannot accept other people's opinions, and this is what Mike White wanted to show with that, I believe. And then Lori and Jacqueline also gossiped about that, which was so crazy, like, get a life. Now let's move on to the whole Ratliff family in The White Lotus season 3. This season has really just impacted me in a way that I felt very captured by it. I felt like it is so interesting, and you know, I'm saying this as someone who doesn't care about TV shows at all. I don't really watch TV shows, I barely even watch movies. I think that it's sort of a waste of time. I know some people would think this is crazy, but I really just think that I've got better shit to do. But The White Lotus is definitely an exception, and this is so interesting to see how everything just unfolds and the deeper meanings that this big piece of art really wants to show us. And there are some interesting dynamics, and it's crazy how this woman is constantly taking lorazepam. It's kind of funny, to be honest, but you guys, do not take lorazepam. It's crazy and it's a drug, so don't do it. You know, I just had to say that when I'm talking about those kind of things. All throughout every single one of the scenes with this family, you could see that they felt very dependent on the money that they had. And you see that Timothy Ratliff, he was someone that felt very pressured by the things happening in his company and whatever, which of course makes sense because he's being threatened that he's gonna die or whatever, but that's not what I want to focus on right now. You saw that Victoria Ratliff, the lorazepam taking woman, was constantly talking about how she wouldn't even think that her life would be worth living if it was uncomfortable and not luxurious and not all lavish and stuff. She basically said, well, I don't think at this age I'm meant to live an uncomfortable life.
I just don't think at this age I'm meant to live an uncomfortable life.
While she has quite a funny accent, this is really interesting because then Saxon also said the same thing to his father. He said that if this business, if this company that you have failed, then my entire life has basically no meaning. I don't have anything else besides that. And all of this was such an interesting commentary on class and how some people, even if they are rich and if they have all the money in the world, are not happy. Just because someone has got a lot of money doesn't mean that they're very happy. If you look at those other families such as Belinda or Mook and that Thailandian guy, you could totally see that they're way happier than the rich people are on that resort usually. They are just not faced with this constant bullshit and this constant toxic dynamic that there is. And you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't really do something with that, and if you don't do good in the world and you're not a good person, then that money is not going to make you any happier. There's that one big saying that I've learned in a book when I was reading about millionaires and making money and stuff. It basically said that money does not change people. Money will never change who you are on the inside, but what money actually does is only brings out what you already are on the inside. So if on the inside you are a good person, you take good care of people, you love doing what you do, and you love leaving a lovely impact on the world, then that is exactly what money's going to bring out of you. It's going to just amplify what you already are on the inside. Now if you are a shitty person like some of the Ratliff people or other people at the White Lotus like Greg, that money is just going to amplify that and bring out those negative kind of things within you. And this concept gets even crazier in real life and the White Lotus when you see that some people depend their entire self-worth on their social status. Like, your social status should not determine the way that you feel about yourself or anything else. So the Ratliff family is just totally crazy, and I'm not even going to talk about this crazy little boy named Lachlan who tried to do stuff with his brother. Like, what the actual... Now let's talk about Rick and his father. So pretty much early on in the entire season, we see that Rick actually tries to get some kind of revenge on his father. So his father was killed by Sritala's husband, and he tries to basically only go to Thailand to meet that guy there. Now the whole point of this essentially is that he wants to feel better because he wants to get revenge on him. He wants to get that gun, shoot it against his head, or, you know, say some stupid shit in front of him. And we've seen that in episode 7. What we also see after that is that he didn't quite feel that much better. He did feel better and satisfied, but he didn't quite feel like this would change his entire life or bring his father back, which actually leads to that one principle that I always believe in, is that revenge is the dumbest and most useless thing a human being can actually do. Like, what are you trying to achieve when you're trying to get some kind of revenge on someone? Like, what is going to happen? Literally nothing. Like, revenge is absolutely useless, and we saw that with Rick perfectly. When you try to harm someone, you are not going to get the harm that they have done to you back. It's not like things are actually going to get better. You might get some momentary satisfaction and some dopamine from this, but you're not going to feel way better, and actually you're mostly just going to feel way shittier than you did before. Well, he was in that meditation session with that one Indian woman. They talked about how he was just feeling so bad, and she was like, you can calm down, you can get better. I'm paraphrasing here right away. He was then saying that no, it can't. He just feels so shitty about everything, and he's just so stuck in this one self-identity where he believes that nothing can change, and he's just so angry about his father being taken away, which I totally understand. I mean, of course, everybody would feel bad about that. I even grew up without a father myself, but I do believe that chasing after that satisfaction of hurting someone else to feel better is not going to do any better, and I think you got my point now. Now, if you want to feel better about your childhood trauma, maybe you should seek a therapist and not a gun. And this whole thing also makes sense in real life nowadays. There's so many people who have childhood trauma, basically pretty much every person, me included. And instead of healing it, and instead of actually working on it, they try to compensate by doing such things as revenge or trying to drink their entire life away, as he did in the previous episode. It's just really useless, and you're gonna feel way shittier. And I do understand that as a compensation, you need this. You need this for momentary pleasure and to feel better, but how do you actually want to feel any actually better on a deeper level if you don't do something with your life? Like, that is just a life thrown away, in my opinion. Again, Mike White was able to show in quite an extreme representation how some people are suffered from childhood trauma and then just project that into their life and make other people's lives hell instead of fixing their own. And this also happens in real life, of course. There's many people who have that kind of life and follow those kinds of principles. Now let's talk about his crazy girlfriend Chelsea for a second. I do think that she is the most likable and best character in this season. She's funny, she's cool, but she's not classy or whatever, which is totally fine. However, I would like to talk about the way that she's gotten lost in her spirituality. Like, I cannot be the only person that has noticed this. And I'm saying this as someone who's very spiritual himself. I've been into spirituality for a couple of years, and I absolutely love that. But there's just this interesting thing that a lot of people call spiritual psychosis, which is essentially about the fact that people get lost in spirituality and, you know, trying to find their big enlightenment, but in fact they can't. It's all just a cover-up. They try to cover up their trauma and their insecurity by this veil, by this constant fake mask that they put over their face, so to say, by being like, I'm spiritual, I do ayahuasca therapies, I do cacao ceremonies, and my partner is my soulmate, and I know him from thousands of other past lives. While I do not believe that those things are bad, and of course they're real and great, but you can really get lost in that if you don't find your own balance and if you're not grounded in it, and Chelsea is the perfect example for this. Unlike the other characters, she's not that deep into this paradigm, so she's not an extreme kind of example, but you can still see that in her. Although they have such a toxic dynamic, she still believes that Rick is her soulmate, and he is the one person that has been meant for her entire life. And of course there is such a thing as soulmates and twin flames or whatever, but maybe it's just a trauma bonding. Like, have you ever thought about the fact that maybe some people, they think that someone is their soulmate and it's deep love, but actually they just bonded over the mutual trauma that they have, and she thinks that she heals him, but actually he is just hurting her.
It's like we're in this yin and yang battle, and I'm hope, and Rick is pain.
And I've even gone through that kind of thing myself once. It's all about understanding that mostly when you think that you heal a person, they actually are just hurting you and making you go even worse down into that negative rabbit hole of hating yourself. Essentially, she gets stuck in this delusion of everything is spiritual and I meditate 10 times a day, which now makes my life into a work of art and everything's perfect and I do not have any problems. But as you could see, there were tons of problems underneath with her and her boyfriend especially. And although they seem to not really have met a lot, there's this interesting thing that I I saw within Chelsea and Piper as well. They both got lost in their spirituality and tried to find a purpose there. While Chelsea was a little more mature and demure, you could say, Piper is of course still a teenager, just like me by the way, and she was seeing through all of this in a different way. You know, her entire family is basically just completely fucked up, and she tries to get an escape from that by doing those kind of things. And every single child in that family tries to find some escape. So Lachlan tries to find his escape through all these kind of weird things that he does with his brother, and then his brother Saxon tries to find an escape in the porn that he's watching and in the crazy finance shit that he's talking about and the protein shakes, and you know, just trying to cover that insecurity as well. However, Piper is the most interesting subject out of the three, although she might not be the flashiest one. She essentially uses this Buddhism and this moving to Taiwan, as the mother said, to escape herself.
You want to live in Taiwan?
I mean, this can be amazing. She says that she wants to find herself there and develop her own sense of spirituality. I think that is amazing. I believe every single person should have their own sense of spirituality and what it means to be spiritual to them. And if you're in your own spiritual journey, just understand that you still have to be grounded, and you cannot float in the sky with your entire thoughts and your being by meditating 10 fucking hours a day. Also, I think it's interesting with Piper how she's basically the only sane and normal person in that family. Like, everyone is basically fucked up, but she seems to be the only one that actually is a normal and interesting kind of person beyond all of the trauma and the crazy shit that's going on behind the fences. Piper then wants to go to that Buddhist camp to learn more about spirituality, and this is actually the most interesting part, and I get to that in a couple of moments again. Before that, I would like to actually touch on the subject of Rick's friend Frank and this whole sex thing, and this really weird ass scene that they gave us that actually has way more meaning than I would have thought at the beginning. Now, something really crazy and that basically creeped every White Lotus watcher out was that one scene where Rick was with his friend Frank that he was meeting in Bangkok. So out of the blue, Frank just started talking about things such as sex and the crazy kinky stuff that he experienced in Thailand. That creeped everyone out when we were watching it, and we were just like, what the fuck? What is the entire point of this scene? It was crazy and weird, but essentially he was talking about how he was having sex with those people in Thailand and how he thought that he actually wanted to be them instead of trying to actually have sex with them, if you get what I mean. And there's a storyline parallel to that with Greg in episode 7 that was revealed, where Greg had the kinky fantasy of watching Saxon and Chloe have sex because of the reason that he, as a child, had watched his parents having sex, and that traumatized him completely. This showcases how oftentimes a lot of people have sexual desires that do not come out of love and self-love and wanting to deeply connect with a different person, but they come out of trauma. He was experiencing some sort of crazy childhood trauma, and then he tried to heal that and use it as a compensation to have sex and, you know, get these kind of kinky experiences. Not only Greg, but also Frank. The show is just as psychological as it is spiritual, and this just really showcases that. When it comes to sexual studies of psychology, it oftentimes seems to be an overarching pattern where you see that people sometimes are into the things sexually that they were abused as a child. So Greg saw these crazy things happen with his parents, as I've just mentioned, and then he was into exactly that thing during sex, which was insane, kind of, right? And there's something similar with Rick's friend Frank, who, by the way, also tried to find his spirituality and who he was in a Buddhist kind of camp, but at the end of the day ended up relapsing again and drinking alcohol again because he didn't do the inner work and he didn't go to therapy whatsoever, but he just simply tried to compensate by thinking that now Buddhism and spirituality are going to heal me. When in reality, they're not. They're just going to open those deepest, darkest parts of yourself and show it to you, so you then know what to do with it. But if you do not know what to do with it, you're just going to end up even more corrupted than before. And this is why spirituality is something really, really interesting all throughout the season, that also in our lives, in our everyday's lives, is more than just, you know, crystals and doing something lovely in meditation, but it is also about shadow work and facing your deepest trauma, and also, of course, in the negative light, doing something with your soul and your mission on earth. Of course, if two adults have consent and they want to do some stuff sexually, they're absolutely free to do that. That is none of my business or your business. What I'm just saying is that sometimes this show can really show how this trauma that people try to compensate comes out through sex. And this whole topic of sex was an even bigger topic in the last season, but in a more different way. It was more about seduction and how sex can really manipulate people, such as Tanya and also all these other people there.
Guess who I am?
Peppa Pig.
I'm Monica Vitti.
Now, as I've just mentioned, let's talk about the most spiritual and interesting part about this season in general, and that was those Buddhist teachings that this one particular Buddhist man was talking about in that monastery. So as Timothy Ratliff tried to just get there and see what his daughter has been up to and who this man that she tries to look up to actually is, he found himself asking questions about death, life, and rebirth. And when he finally had the courage to ask about the question, what happens after death, the monk answered something very, very interesting that I really want to highlight right now. He basically said that you can imagine our human soul, our humans, as just one drop of one big ocean. And before you get incarnated, before you actually get born, you are one part of this big one ocean. And then when you get born, you become one drop. When there's a wave that hits the shore or just actually hits against another wave, there's that one little drop that separates. And just for a limited and tiny amount of time, you as a human get born and get separated from this one divine consciousness that there is, which then is represented by the ocean that he talked about. And then when you die, you are this one drop coming right back to this one essential and infinite universe and ocean that you came from. Basically, he describes the human experience as just a temporary experience where we consciously choose to separate ourselves from the one divine consciousness, from the one divine source or God or universe, as you want to call it, to then have that human experience to grow, to heal and evolve, and then we can get back. And when we die, we're just part of the big one consciousness again, before we, in some other part or some other life, get back to being just a drop again.
You land back into the water, become one with the ocean again. One consciousness.
I basically knew about all of these things that he was saying already, but I found this metaphor that he used so interesting. Like, this analogy is something I have never heard before. 3 years ago, when I started getting into spirituality, I rather soon noticed that we are all souls. We are more than just this human body, and we came here, even if things are painful and even if things might be a little bad at the beginning, to learn, to grow, to evolve, and to have a mission here. And this Buddhist was talking about pretty much the same thing, how humans actually just separate from the consciousness, which is what we do. When we get born, when we come out of our mother's vagina, we get separated from being just a soul. We are then a soul with a human body. We incarnated, which is essentially what the word carnated is about. We become meat, we become human flesh. We essentially choose to be here, we choose our family, we chose our name, we chose everything that needed to happen, therefore for us to grow and our soul to just have a lovely human life over here. And this art piece and this way of phrasing it was just so crazy. I have never seen such a thing. Thank you, Mike White. And before that, the Buddhist monk also talked about pain and pleasure, and how a lot of people, especially those rich people, which was who he was talking about essentially, try to get away from pain by indulging in pleasure, by living a hedonistic lifestyle, so to say. And then they find themselves having even more pain than before. This was a very interesting key scene in this entire season. It just talked about every single character in one basic sentence. It basically just summed everything up. He said that these people, they try to get away from pain, they try to get away from negative experiences and facing their trauma, facing their negative things by indulging in all of these things, such as drugs or lorazepam in that case.
When did you take my lorazepam?
Alcohol or sex or porn or spirituality even good things can be an escape. And then they see that they find themselves only experiencing more pain, and actually running away from your pain is gonna make you feel even more pain. And so you need to face your shit right away. Basically, pain has to be felt, and sometimes we need to go through episodes of pain to then grow from that and to be way happier. You know, whenever there's a storm in nature, let's take nature as an example, just as this Buddhist monk did. In nature, you have flowers, you have trees, and when there's a storm, it's really dark and it's crazy and they might be afraid, so to say, right? But then after that storm is over, what happens? They get water. They get all the water from the storm, and they had a little bit of a shake-up. They feel so much better after that, because from that they can grow, and their leaves can grow, and the trees can grow, and all of these plants. And it might have been a little painful during that storm because the plants were shaking up here and there, and it wasn't easy, but they had to go through it. And you can find a general overarching meaning all throughout this entire season. You see that it basically just shows us that it doesn't matter how much money is in a person's investments and bank accounts and how good their company goes and how rich they are. If they do not face their darkest traumas, and if they are not a good person, and if they're not living a good life, then they are not going to feel good, and their life is going to be absolutely shitty. They will end up feeling depressed, they will end up being drug or alcohol addicted, and they will simply have a miserable life. And your life isn't actually going to have a solid foundation, and it can all crumble in 1 second. So this principle has just been shown to us in such a lovely way. And now myself, as a young guy doing all my stuff, doing my business, also I have my kind of goals, I have my aspirations to be rich and famous as well. And what I'm saying with all of this is that it's important to really lead with your heart and still be a good person, because only then you can enjoy it and actually live a happy and lovely lifestyle. So let me just say that through facing your darkest shadows and expressing your loveliest and best parts of yourself, you can really have a lovely life and not live a shitty life like the White Lotus characters, even if you're rich. This show is just such an absolute masterpiece. I can't wait to see what will happen in the finale next week. This was quite a big project of mine. I was just editing the video and I could not end it without telling you about the insanely talented artist who made the music for The White Lotus. His name is Cristobal Tapia de Veer, and I am so thrilled by his music. I would like to share it with you guys. It's linked in the video description. I linked his channel there. You can check him out. He is so talented. White Lotus would not be the same without him. I love you all so much. I'm so grateful beyond means for all the support you've given me. Make sure to tell me in the comments about any other themes that you've seen all throughout this season, what you would love to see, and what you would love me to talk about a little more. I love you all so much. I'm so grateful beyond means. See you in my next video. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Some of you guys still have not subscribed to my channel. Thank you so much. Goodbye.